Hi everyone, so the alternator went bad on my work car. It's a 2007 Toyota Yaris. So it's stranded here at the auto parts store, so we're going to replace it in the parking lot. So the alternator is right down here. It's just a few bolts that we got to take off and a few connections to disconnect. You want to make sure that the belt goes back together in the same orientation. So before you take it all apart, one thing you want to make sure is that you take a look and make sure you see where the belt is wrapping around, so that it can all go back together the same way. And the first thing you want to do is disconnect the negative terminal of your battery. I'm actually going to be replacing the battery today also. I got a new battery and a new alternator, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the old battery completely out to start. So let's get started on that. So the battery is just a 10mm bolt for the bracket, and then a 10mm bolt for the harness holding the negative and positive terminals. So let's go ahead and take the bracket off first. Okay, it's just a little hook on a bolt, if you can see that. So once you loosen that top nut, you can slide the hook free, and then you can take the whole top bracket off. Now let's start with the negative terminal. You want to loosen that. Alright, so that nut just snapped. So, yeah, it's been a while since this battery's been replaced. So we'll just have to get a new nut and washer for it. Now let's try it on the positive terminal. Let's pull this off. Now let's try it on the positive terminal, see if the nut snaps over here. The bolt snaps. There's quite a bit of corrosion, so I'm going to get a screwdriver and try to pry it up and scrape away some of that corrosion. So once you scrape away some of that corrosion, if you have it, I mean, I should have done a better job of staying on top of it. If you notice that you're getting a corrosive buildup like that, you can come out with a metal wire brush, scrape it away from each terminal individually, keep it clean, keep a good connection. So now we're able to slide this one off though. Try to clean it up before we put a new battery back in. And then the whole battery just comes out. And if you're buying a new battery, normally they'll give you a little bit of your money back if you return the old battery where you bought the new one. It's like a core deposit. So we're not going to put the new battery in yet though. We're going to get the alternator switched out first, and then we'll come back, and the last thing we do is put the new battery in and put the new terminals back on it. So the first thing you want to do now that the battery is disconnected is take off your wiring harnesses that are attached to your alternator. So go ahead, there's a little push tab on the right side here. You just got to push that tab on the right, and then you can pull it straight off. And this next one has a cover on it. We want to try not to break the cover. All right, there it goes. Just kind of trying to pry away at the head of it. And underneath that is another bolt. It looks like a 10mm, we'll confirm that. Yep, it's a 10mm bolt. So just go ahead, loosen that nut, try not to drop it. Go ahead and put that in a place you're not going to lose it. And now you can take off that little harness and put the cap somewhere you're not going to lose it. Now that you have your two wire connections off, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take this 12mm bolt and loosen that up, because that is the bracket holding the alternator in place, keeping tension on your belt. If you had a good alternator, you just needed to tighten up the belt a little bit, you would just loosen this and pry your alternator out this way, and that would put more tension on your belt. Another good thing before we loosen this, just go ahead and check what the tension feels like on your belt. If you didn't have an issue with tension, that'll let you know about how tight you want it when we go to put the new alternator in. All right, so let's take our 12mm socket. Just go ahead and loosen this bolt. Hopefully we don't break another bolt. It's pretty corroded, so if you have a little bit of penetrating fluid like WD-40, or I like to use liquid wrench, PB blaster, any of those, just to coat it a little bit, get it moving a little better than this. Okay, so the bolt was so corroded in there that the head sheared off, but it's not an issue yet, because we can still take this bolt off and take the whole arm off, and then that way we can still get the alternator out. Hopefully that your bolt won't shear off, but if it does, it's not the end of the world. So we're gonna go ahead and take this one off. It's still also a 12mm. That one has a lot better movement. I'm just gonna loosen it enough. I'm not going to take it all the way off, but I'm just going to loosen it enough that I can pick it up out of the way. Now the alternator will have a free range to come out once we get the bottom bolt off. So this bracket holding your AC condenser hose, it's got a 10mm bolt attaching it to the frame. We want to take that off because it'll give us more space to get at this bottom bolt of the alternator. And also that bolt will only slide out if this bracket is moved out of the way. So you're probably gonna have to get a wrench to get at it, 10mm wrench. Speed wrench would be ideal. You just wanna take that bolt out. So we can move this bracket. Okay, so once we get this bolt almost out, get it just finger tight. Take the bolt out, put it somewhere you won't lose it. Now we can move this bracket out of the way so that we can get to that bolt head down there. Alright, so I actually took the adapter off. You can, if you have a short socket, you can get on it alright. Mine was very locked in tight, so I had to use some PB Blaster on the back side here, or where your threads are. So spray a little bit of PB Blaster in there to loosen it up, and then get on this side and just try to slowly move it. So I got it broke free. So now just want to get our socket back on it. And actually, it was so tight, but now it's finger tight that we broke it free initially. This bolt is the hardest to get to, and it is the one that will be exposed to the most elements on the bottom side of the alternator here. So this one is definitely the hardest part of the whole project. This is why we took this bracket loose, is so that we can slide it out of the way and slide this bolt out. So yeah, as you can see, the threads are on the end here. So this is where I tried to spray the PB Blaster in to break it free. As you can see, it was pretty corroded on the tip just to lock it in place. Once that broke free, it was not very tight. So just go ahead. Alright, so now we can actually go ahead. You can see it pivots on that point. So we're going to actually be getting the alternator out. So we just want to slide the belt off to the side. Once the belt is off, now there's nothing holding the alternator in place. Keep that arm out of the way. Now we can rotate it off and just kind of shimmy it off of the frame. As you can see, that arm is what holds it in place, so now we just gotta shimmy it the rest of the way off. There we go. Now the alternator is free. We just have to maneuver it out. So there's the old alternator. So that sits over that arm and the bolt slides through it and pinches it in place. So now let's compare this to our new one. Alright, so here's our new alternator. Just kind of getting it out. Getting a lot of these tags off. Okay, so that's where our wire harnesses will hook up into. They give you a new bolt for that, or a new nut for that. As you can see, this is where it's gonna sit over the arm. You want to make sure that that's flush right there, because otherwise you're gonna have a hard time getting it over. So if that is not flush, you might have to tap it down to make it flush before you install it, because when you put your bolt in, the bolt will squeeze it together and hold it in place. Yep, so other than that, it does not come with a new bolt, so we sheared that bolt off, so we'll have to get a bolt to replace that. But it basically just goes in the exact same way it came out, so let's get started on that. Okay, so now we're going to fit the new alternator in, get it around that arm, and slide our bolt in. So go ahead and set the bolt somewhere reachable. Get your alternator down there, get it over that arm. Get your bolt started through. So we have it started, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get it snug enough that we can still rotate the alternator, but not so loose that we'll have to fight it once the alternator's in position. So just get in lightly, get some turns on it. Okay, but don't crank it down. Now you can roll your alternator all the way forward. And we're gonna get our belt back on the pulley. Okay, belt is on. Go ahead and look down the belt. Make sure it didn't come off of your main drive shaft. And it goes across your water pump there. So make sure your belt is in a good position. And now we're ready to go. Okay, so now that we got that rotated back to where we need, let's go ahead and put our control arm back in place. Get your 12mm socket. Again, we're going to want to leave this loose enough that we can rotate it to find the right position we need. So it's not crank it down all the way, but enough that we can still adjust it. That bolt on the back side, we got to get under that wire harness, it looks like. That's good. We can still adjust it. Now, since we sheared off the bolt on the old one, the nice thing about being stuck at the auto parts store, I was able to go in and buy a new bolt and new washer. Had to get them in a 6-pack, but if you also shear that bolt, it is an M8 125. So that will let us reattach here, and then once we get that bolt and washer in, we can adjust the belt tension. We got our new bolt and new washer on, so go ahead and put it through the arm and just roll it in to the alternator. Don't tighten it up though, because now we need to get the tension on the alternator. The best way to do this grab a long screwdriver or a pry bar, and you want to get it in, and you want to push against the actual motor and against the alternator. So you don't want to push on anything that'll break, but by doing this, it lets the arm adjust where it needs to be. You can feel the tension on your belt. Now you just want to tighten that bolt. Alright, so the new bolt is actually 13mm, not 12. So go ahead and get tension on the alternator between the motor block, so that way you can tighten up your belt. And now we just want to tighten this bolt. Don't have to go crazy because it's only going into aluminum, so you don't want to strip it. Just a good snug bolt. Feel the tension on your belt. Make sure it feels similar to how it was at the beginning. Give it a once over, make sure it's going through the right pulleys. So now that that is in place, we can take our 12mm and tighten the arm. So now we're just going to take 12mm socket, tighten our arm. Don't have to get crazy with it, just snug. Now our alternator is in place. We just have to tighten that 14mm bolt on the bottom. Okay, so get our socket down to the bottom. And we're just going to tighten up that 14mm bolt on the bottom. You'll feel it start to squeeze onto that support arm. And again, not crazy tight, but just tight enough that it's all going to be held in place. Now we can go ahead, that our alternator is completely mounted. We can go ahead and put our wiring harnesses back onto it. and we can get the AC bracket arm back in place. So the first thing you want to do is you can take your little harness, kind of look at it, make sure it looks pretty clean, good connection, and then you'll slide that right onto that bottom connection, and it just slides right on, clicks in. Now the next one, our ground wire here. If I had sandpaper, it would be a little better, but you want to just clean it up so it's making good contact with the new alternator. Just scratching the surface so it's bare metal, and put those ears inward, the little ears on your connector here, put those inward towards the alternator, and go ahead and put the nut on the outside, and we'll get our 10mm socket to tighten that down. Doesn't need to be crazy tight, just like everything else on the alternator. Just snug. It's not going to move around. Now we can get our plastic piece to fit over, hopefully without breaking it. And it just snaps over and covers it all up. So now the connections are made. Last thing to do is the bracket there. That might get in the way. Okay, so now just getting the bolt back into our AC hose bracket. Get it finger tight, and then the best thing to get at is going to be the speed wrench. $10mm. Just snug that down. Don't drop your wrench. Now we can go ahead and work on getting the battery back in place. So go ahead, take your new battery, set it where the old one sat. You can go ahead and take off this little lifting harness that it comes with. Positive on your left, negative on your right. You can go ahead and get our bracket back across it. So loop it into that, hook it into there on that side. And now your little hook can come across. And now, all we have to do to secure the battery down is tighten down that 10mm bolt. Alright, so you might want to put a little PB blaster on it. Like I said, mine was pretty corroded. You'll have to hold the hook on so it's not just spinning on the bottom. Alright, now that we got the harness in place and snugged down so the battery won't jostle around, go ahead and take the cap off of the positive terminal. Go ahead and bring it down. Use your 10mm socket to tighten it down on the terminal. This is a spot where you want to be careful. You don't want to touch your socket to anything on the car when you're tightening down your battery terminals, or you don't want to put a wrench across your two terminals. It'll short out the battery. So just tighten down your battery terminal, push the cap back on, and now we can bring the negative over. I had to get a new bolt. Go ahead and hand tighten it. And just use our 10mm. Tighten it down. Okay, now our two terminals are tight. Make sure you didn't leave any tools in the compartment, and now let's try to start it. So now we're going to try starting it up. Alright, there we go. So, new battery, new alternator. You can see the belt looks like it's running on track. Battery terminals are tight. So, now, it's just for testing time. We're going to go ahead and let it run, let it charge the new battery. I'm going to drive it around the block and then take it back home.